Letters from a Friend at the End of the World. Chapter 22. Welcome back to the real world, Trixie Lulamoon. Her voice was like a muffled chorus of metal scraped against metal, harsh and biting, though it did not match the look on her face. The cloaked mare stretched out her thick metal limb in offering, a slight smile on her face. A cold chill ran down Trixie's spine as she grasped the mare's hoof, but she was careful not to let it show. Through the haze of her half-awakened state, she could just barely make out the muted light streaming through a grime-covered window and guessed that it must still be daytime. Steadying herself on a heavy wooden table, she brought up a hoof to her forehead and lightly massaged her temple. "Ugh, my head," she moaned. "It feels like it was just beat with a log." The mare appeared unfazed, merely spinning around to scoop a carved wooden cup off a small table. The liquid inside the cup sloshed around as she held it out for Trixie. Warily, Trixie eyed the contents of the cup with a raised eyebrow. It smelled like lavender, but it couldn't have been anything for all she knew. "What is it?" she asked. "Another potion?" "Tea." Trixie's brow furrowed. "Tea?" She nodded. "For your headache," she said, nodding toward the hoof Trixie was currently used to rub her temple. Still cautious, though more than willing to rid herself of the splitting headache, she took the cup in her magic and held it up for inspection. Everything seemed fine, though it was hard to tell given the general lack of light in the area. Deciding that if this mare had wanted to poison her, she would have already had ample opportunity, Trixie tipped the cup against her lips and let the warm tea slide down her throat. Her eyes shut open, sputtering and coughing. She nearly choked as the acerbic liquid hit her tongue. With a grimace that even the most disgruntled donkey would have been jealous of, she held the tea at arm's length, sticking out her tongue in disgust. "That is most certainly not tea," she said. Trixie could have sworn she heard the mare chuckle, but the look on her face was unassuming as usual. The only indication of mirth she gave was the slight twinge in the corner of her mouth that threatened to spread into a fully matured smile. "Bitterroot," she said, pointing to the cup. "It's lavender tea mixed with bitterroot. It's a natural painkiller," she explained. "I see. That would explain why it's so, bitter," she said, thinking that bitter was not nearly a strong enough word to describe the taste. More like pungent or acidic. Setting the cup aside, she said, "Yes, well, perhaps I'll finish it later." "You will not cure your headache by not drinking it," the mare said, with hints of smirk hiding behind her expressionless face. "Maybe so, but Trixie is not particularly interested in burning her taste buds off yet." She could still taste the stuff in her throat, and it made her lips curl into an unpleasant frown. Deciding to ignore it as best she could, she nodded at the window where the light was cracking its way inside. "How long was I unconscious?" "Only a few hours," the mare answered, "though you were not unconscious, merely asleep, experiencing a dreamlike state. A vision, if you will." She approached the previously indicated window and unlatched it, throwing it open to let more light stream in. Now illuminated, though no more expressful, her face remained distinctly unreadable. "So that was a dream," Trixie said, more to herself than the mare. "But it felt so real." "It was real," she said. "More metaphysical than you're used to, perhaps, but no less real than you or I." Trixie shook her head. "But you just said it was a dream." "I said it was a dream-like state, not a dream. A minor but important distinction, I might add." Trixie ran a hoof through her mane subconsciously, then looked down at the brooch on her chest. She placed her hoof on it and felt the edges of the gem against her skin, allowing its coldness to permeate her body. She bit her lip, then looked to the mare. "If it was real, then—" She trailed off, looking back down at the brooch. "Then you know what you have to do," the mare finished for her. "The most powerful unicorn who ever lived," she said quietly, barely more than a whisper. The mare pretended not to hear. Clenching her teeth and squeezing the brooch, she nodded, more to herself than her. "Yes, I know what I have to do, what I'm meant to do." Steeling herself, she straightened up and locked eyes with the mare. The mare's demeanor suddenly shifted. A smile came over her face. "Well then, allow me to point you in the right direction, Trixie Lulamoon." It was a surprisingly beautiful day outside. The sun shone warmly across the land, and not a single cloud was to be found in the sky. There was even a light breeze that kept it from becoming too hot. None of this, though, made Trixie feel any better. She ground her hoof into her forehead, trying to drive the headache from her mind with sheer force. With a pitiful moan, she quietly regretted not drinking the rest of the tea she had been offered. As horrid as it had been, she would have still gladly taken that over the skull-splitting migraine. Walking along the dirt path, her cape's fringes dragging along through the rocks and gravel, fraying and tearing more with each passing day, she couldn't help but wish for the 100th time that she still had her mobile stage. Losing that had been a major blow. Still, though, it had been nothing compared to the blow to her ego for losing to Twilight Sparkle. All that would change soon enough, though, and she would become more powerful than any unicorn in existence, although that would mean that she would be doing exactly what the eye told her to do. She decided that it was a small price to pay for absolute power. Besides, she could still do whatever she wanted once she had that power, so it wasn't like she was just doing as she was told anyway. At least that's what she told herself. She did her best to take her mind off the intense headache by letting her eyes wander around, mulling over what the eye had told her. Finally, after a few minutes, she spied a small lake off in the distance. Her heart soared. The water would help soothe her aching head, and besides, she needed to refill her water skin. It was running low, and she suspected that she had a long journey ahead of her. As she trotted through the grass toward the lake, she recalled the mare's last words before she left. "North," she said. "You'll be going north from here to a small town nestled in a cozy valley called Hoofington. It's merely a simple trading outpost without much to its name. Most ponies leave when they're young, but the ones that stay often become merchants or craftsmen due to the lack of any other jobs being available." Trixie frowned. "Yes, I've been there before." Her hoof moved to her brooch again. "Ah, good. Then you'll know it when you see it?" the mare asked. Trixie nodded, though with a glazed-over look in her eyes. "I don't think I could forget it if I tried," she chuckled mirthlessly. The other mare noticed Trixie's behavior but said nothing of it. Instead, she continued. "There is a smithy located on the far side of town, past the mill and around where the river curves to the northeast. The master there will help you in any way he can. He is a good man, and he can direct you further, perhaps even give you some supplies for your journey. But be warned," she said, her face suddenly becoming grim. "You mustn't stray from the path when you leave here. The road to Hoofington is safe enough, yes, but wander too far and you may find yourself in deadly peril. Bandits and thieves roam the countryside, preying on the unsuspecting passerby." Again Trixie nodded. "I'll keep an eye out," she said, only half believing that there was truly any danger. She turned to leave, pausing for only a moment at the door. Turning back around, Trixie said, Thank you." She stopped. "I don't even know your name." The corners of the mare's mouth curled into a sly grin. "You never asked," she said. Trixie opened her mouth to protest, but then realized that she hadn't ever asked. "It's all right, I understand," she said, placing her steel limb over her chest. She dipped her head ever so slightly in a miniature bow. "I am Nadir." "Nadir," Trixie repeated. Nadir gave a subtle nod. "Thank you, Nadir. Thank you for everything." "Nadir," she mumbled under her breath as she approached the lake. She came to the water's edge and leaned over, peering into the shallow waters. She saw her reflection staring back at her, ragged cloak flapping lightly in the breeze and brooch glimmering in the early afternoon sunlight. She smiled. "Thank you." Taking a deep breath, Trixie puffed out her cheeks and dunked her head in the water, immediately deciding that coming to the lake was the best decision she had ever made. The cool water brought with it a wave of relief, and put her headache in a chokehold, forcing it into submission. She relished the feeling, but soon had to breathe, and so pulled her head from the water, throwing droplets to the sky and creating a stunning rainbow that lasted for the briefest of moments before dissipating. She brushed errant strands of her wet mane from her eyes, tossing it back over her shoulders and soaking her cape. With her face upturned, she stood for a moment, simply enjoying the feeling of the sun on her face. She let out a breath slowly through her nose. Her eyes closed. "What you doin'?" The voice was small and childish, with just a hint of songbird-like quality. Trixie's neck nearly snapped due to how fast she turned to face the owner of that playful voice. Sitting, half submerged in the water, was a pony. Her front legs crossed in front of her, supporting her head as she lazily rocked it back and forth, a mirthful grin playing across her face. Trixie shook her head. Clearly she must be seeing things. Opening one eye slowly, she saw that the pony was still there. Her grin transformed into a look of amused perplexity. "You look silly," she said, giggling. "How come you're shaking your head like that, silly?" "Because you can't possibly be here," Trixie said, resolutely. "Why not?" Her voice grated against Trixie's ears. It had such a sweet-sounding, sing-songy quality to it that it made her sound like a petulant child. "Because I didn't see anybody else when I walked over here, and I didn't hear you coming, so you must be some kind of hallucination brought on by this insufferable migraine." She fell back on her haunches and squeezed her head between her two forehooves, pressing on either temple. She rubbed circles around them, assuming that would somehow exorcise this impossible pony from her sight. Try as she might, though, the pony remained there, now happily blowing bubbles in the water and giggling as they popped. "What's a migraine?" the pony asked, looking up from her bubbles. Trixie sighed. "It's like a really bad headache," she said, "and apparently causes extremely vivid hallucinations." The pony chuckled, covering her mouth with one hoof. "I'm not a hallucination," she said after a moment. "Here, I'll prove it." Before Trixie could say anything, the pony spread both of her limbs out and brought them crashing down in the water like a pony tossing a skipping stone, only with one less skipping and more splashing. Cold water washed over Trixie, and this time it felt decidedly less relieving and much more aggravating. She shook her head, throwing water everywhere, doing her best to straighten out her mane. She let it all hang in front of her so she could squeeze the water from it. "I wouldn't bother," the pony said. "It's just going to get wet again anyway." "Not if I can help it," Trixie mumbled, tossing her mane back. Trixie gave the playful pony her best glare, but it didn't seem to faze her. She merely smiled with that same stupid smile. "Fine," Trixie said, giving up. "You win. You're real." The pony clapped her hooves excitedly. "I win. I win." Yes, you win. Now then, come out of this water so you can't splash me anymore," Trixie said, waving the pony out of the lake. Despite Trixie's insistence, she didn't move. Her face curled into a small frown. "I can't," Trixie groaned. "And why not?" "'Cause my dad told me not to," she said as if it was the most normal thing in the world. "He says I'm just supposed to come up here and talk to ponies, but I can't leave the lake." Trixie's eyebrows rose up. "What? Why?" "He says sea ponies aren't supposed to leave the water, 'cause we need the water to survive." Trixie rubbed her temples again, trying to clear away the migraine, because she had clearly just misheard what the pony said. "Did you say sea pony?" she said, sure that she was about to be corrected. The pony, or rather sea pony, smiled happily. "Yep." She rolled over in the water and flashed her dull green tail, using it to splash the water, soaking Trixie again. She giggled and offered a half-sincere apology. "Whoopsie, my bad." Trixie was dumbfounded. This migraine was really doing a number on her. "But this isn't even the sea," she said. "This is a lake. Shouldn't you be lake ponies or something?" "Yeah, I know, right?" she said, suddenly ecstatic. "I keep telling my dad that we should call ourselves lake ponies, but he doesn't listen." Her face lit up, and she wriggled her tail happily. "Maybe you could tell him that. I bet he'd listen to you." Trixie held out a hoof, doing her best to silence the sea pony. Whoa. I am not telling your dad anything," she said. "Look, I'm kind of in a hurry, so I should really be on my way. But it's been, nice meeting you." With that, she gathered herself up and turned to walk away. "Wait!" the girl cried. "Don't go! Come swim with me!" She splashed the water, desperately trying to get Trixie's attention. Trixie turned back around and saw a look of utter sadness cross the sea pony's face. For a moment, she almost felt sorry for her and was about to say something when she came to her senses and told herself what a ridiculously bad idea that was. "Sorry, but I must be going." The sea pony lazily floated on her back. "The water's really nice," she said in a sing-song voice. "It feels really good." Trixie hesitated, wanting to turn around and walk away, but feeling herself strangely wanting to take a dip in the lake with the odd sea pony. She debated the pros and cons to herself, meanwhile keeping an eye on the girl. She had almost made up her mind when she saw a wild look come over the sea pony. Her eyes lit up with excitement as she dove into the water with the agility of a barracuda. A second later, she resurfaced with a fish in her hooves, smiling happily and licking her lips. Her eyes flashed a bit as she bit into the fish ravenously, tearing it apart in a bloody mess. Trixie's eyes practically exploded out of her head with how wide they grew. She was rooted to the spot, and she couldn't look away as the girl ripped the fish apart, throwing bloody scales everywhere. For a brief moment, she saw the girl's mouth was lined with 100 tiny teeth, all razor-sharp and thin as blades of grass. Her heart was beating itself out into her throat now, so she swallowed it back down. After a few seconds, the sea pony had finished her meal and smiled a bloody smile at Trixie. Fish are so tasty," she said sweetly, though more to herself than Trixie. "What exactly did your dad tell you to do again?" The little sea pony licked her lips clean, and then said, "Oh, he told me to come up here and talk to ponies who come to the lake." "And then do what?" Just try to get them to swim with me," she said nonchalantly. "For what purpose? Because swimming is fun?" "No other reason." "Well," the sea pony brought a hoof up to her chin and tapped it thoughtfully. "I suppose there is another reason, but it's a secret," she said playfully, putting her hoof over her lips and making shushing sounds. Trixie felt like she knew where this was going now, and she almost couldn't bring herself to ask what the reason was. She gulped and slowly started to back away from the lake's edge, keeping her eyes trained on the sea pony. "I see. Well, it's been lovely talking to you and all," Trixie said, holding a fake smile as she retreated. "Maybe we'll see each other again soon." The girl giggled. "Probably sooner than you think." Trixie stopped, tensing her legs in preparation for a quick escape. "What do you mean by that?" She backstroked in a circle, not looking at Trixie, as she said, "Oh, nothing." Spitting a stream of water out into a fountain-like spout, she sat up in the water, then nodded. "Okay, you guys can take her now." Trixie felt two shadows looming over her. "You guys?" she repeated. "Who guys?" "Us guys," came a gruff voice from behind her. She turned around just in time to see two muscular sea ponies balancing on their tails and holding tridents. Before there was a loud thwack, and the stars exploded in front of her. Darkness overtook her as she fell to the ground. As the two stallion sea ponies picked her up again and began dragging her limp form into the water, the girl waved at her, saying, "Night-night, sleepyhead," and then disappeared beneath the glassy surface of the cold lake, leaving no trace of her, nor Trixie's existence. A single raven on the opposite shore of the lake picked at scraps from a small pile of bones, some as thick as a pony's leg, before giving a sorrowful caw and flying away. And that is the end of Chapter 22.